Hello, everybody. I'm Zachary. This is Room and Board, and welcome to the Rule Book Club. It's the book club for people who like to listen to read tabletop role-playing game rulebooks. This month, we're talking about Trophy, the dark tabletop role-playing game about horror and mystery and the hungry woods. Why did I pick Trophy for this month's episode? Well, the answer is pretty simple. I was reading through the comments on another video and someone said, hey, you should do Trophy next. I had no idea what Trophy was, no idea at all. Yeah, hey, let's give this thing a go. I've not read it before. I have no idea what it's about. I very quickly skimmed the website. I typed in Trophy. I went onto the internet. And I found the website for Trophy, and it seemed interesting and cool, and it looked like a spoopy game. And we're heading into September. I mean, we're heading into October. What am I talking about? We're heading into October, which means it's Halloween month. Maybe a spooky, scary Halloween game is just what the Rulebook Club needs. When I sat down and to go get myself a copy, I realized Trophy is a Kickstarter game. I had no idea that it was a Kickstarter game. I hadn't heard about it in Kickstarter. Chris didn't tell me about it. He didn't add it to his rundown. Failing in his obligations. And so I found out that I couldn't get a hold of a physical copy, at least not yet. I looked around, I couldn't find anything. So I settled for the PDF. And then I came to a discovery. Trophy isn't one tabletop role-playing game, it's two tabletop role-playing games, Trophy Dark and Trophy Gold. And so this episode, I think we're going to mainly focus on Trophy Dark. I was thinking about doing two episodes, one for Trophy Dark, one for Trophy Gold, but I might just combine them into one episode. We'll see. We'll see. If this is a long video, and we did both, and if this is a shorter video, expect another one soon to follow. So let's begin with Trophy Dark, the game that I think is more representative of the sort of the design goals of the team. The game that feels more sort of pointed and interesting to me was Trophy Dark. So let's roll back a little bit. What the heck is Trophy? Trophy Dark at all? I said it was a spooky game. It is a game about desperate treasure hunters going out into the wild, unknown, mysterious, and magical parts of the world looking for treasure to bring back home. And the big conceit about Trophy Dark is that the adventurers are doomed from the start. The game is called Trophy not because they are going into the forest to claim trophies and bring them home. It is because all the characters that the players will be playing in Trophy Dark are the trophies that the forest, that the wilderness will take, right? You, player, you are the trophy that the wilderness will claim. Your life, your hopes, your ambitions, your drives will draw you circle by circle into the depths of doom and despair. And when you have nothing left to lose, when ruin has piled upon your shoulders, you will die or be lost or be corrupted, and the wilderness will take you. Right? Trophy is the game about the hungry forest and how it dooms all who enter. And because Trophy Dark is about losing, right? It is about tragedy. It is about characters walking to their doom like characters in so many horror films do. It requires a lot of player buy-in, right? When your players are sitting down to play Trophy, it is not a surprise when their characters start to die. It's the selling point, right? You go to your friends and you say, I would love to play Trophy Dark. It's a game where everybody dies, and that's the point, right? We're all driving intentionally towards tragedy. We're all walking in knowing that horror is the destination. We all know that most, if not all of us, are going to get killed or worse, and that is the point, right? In so many tabletop role-playing games, the idea is you go in and conquer terrible threats, and in very deadly tabletop role-playing games, some games that are very fun to lose in, there's a lot of mechanics, a lot of ways to sort of stave off your eventual defeat. to make the times when you are defeated by a sludge or devoured by a space alien sort of important, right? You fought the good fight. But in Trophy, the goal is, as a player, to walk open armed to your doom. And I think that sets Trophy Dark apart from a lot of things. It also fixes a big problem that a lot of tabletop role playing games have when it comes to telling horror stories. Horror is a really, like, scary horror stories are a really hard thing to pull off in a tabletop role playing game for like a lot of reasons. I remember I was playing a space tabletop role playing game and was setting up this horrible situation for the players. One of the characters, I was going to have their hand ripped off by a horrible space beast, and that hand was going to like scutter across the table and leave. And so this big climactic scene that I had been building up towards sort of occurred, and I described the player's hand getting ripped off, and everybody around the table looked at me with horror, but it wasn't horror from the character's perspective, right? It was player horror. It was players looking at me, their game master, and saying, "Oh my gosh, he has broken the rules of the game. He has betrayed us by neglecting all of these rules. The monster shouldn't have been able to hit me. There are these rules about how I'm hit. The monster shouldn't be able to take off my arm. There's nothing in the damage taking rules that say losing limbs is a possibility. At the very least, this should have resulted in a combat. Well, like, how dare you, GM, rip off my arm?" And so this event that I built towards, I established well throughout the story leading up to this point, fell completely flat because the nature of tabletop role playing games, everybody's trying to min-max, everybody's trying to game the system. The kind of horror that I ended up creating by ripping off this character's arm, and we ended up undoing it because it didn't play well at the table. But the kind of horror I was trying to create did not occur, right? And this is a big problem with horror in tabletop role-playing games. What is horror? Like, thematically, in a storytelling sense, what is horror? Horror is a terrible discovery. It's the discovery of a terrible, terrible truth. Oh. I didn't turn on the light. I don't know if I'm well lit. I'm going to turn on the light now. I'm going to probably be lit differently for the second half of this video. Hopefully that's not weird. Oh, I'm going to look very different, aren't I? We're going to live with it. Horror is really tough to pull off. What is horror? It is the discovery of a terrible truth. You've discovered that the telephone call is coming from inside the house, right? The murderer is inside the house already. To learn that truth is horrible, right? You've learned a fact, and once you've confirmed the fact, yes, the telephone call is coming from inside the house, that is what horror is, right? And it's really hard to do that in a tabletop role-playing game because what you need to do to make a truth land with players is you need to establish it well. It needs to be sort of based in the fiction, and it also needs to be something that players haven't arrived at sort of, before, you presupposed it, right? When you're trying to create a sense of horror around the table, you need to be able to reveal something to the players that they didn't expect was going to happen, but make complete sense within the rules of the universe and within the rules of the tabletop role-playing game. And that needs to catch people off guard. The disorientation that occurs when characters are trying to reorient themselves after a change in the equilibrium of the universe is what horror is. Like in the movie Alien, the crew of the Nostromo, they fight to save their crewmate who has just had an encounter with this weird face-hugging alien creature, and they have all this stress, and they're using the rules of their universe, their medical system, to try to save their crewmate, and they've succeeded. Oh, he's fine, and you know what? He's at breakfast with them, and they're all a little worried about him still. What has he changed? No, he's still making jokes like normal. Okay, everybody, release the tension. Bang! The chest burster explodes from his chest, and the crew all realizes at a moment that they have failed their crewmate. They've realized that there's something they don't understand in their midst. They understand, oh wait, our medical technology, our technology period, has had no effect on this thing. And then the little alien that bursts out of the guy's chest scurries away, and they're dealing with the fact that, oh, we are one less crew person on this ship. They're dealing with the new fact, oh, that creature that burst out of his chest is somewhere on this ship. They're dealing with the fact, we cannot track it. We don't know where it is. We don't know how to kill it. We don't know if it can be killed. We don't know. But what we do know is we're all in trouble. And this moment, this brilliant moment in movies, is a beautiful horror moment, because everybody is discovering at once the terrible, terrible truth of their situation. And it's really hard to pull that off in a tabletop role-playing game, right? The players have the rules of the universe. They have the physics textbook for the game space you're playing in. It's the rule book for the game, right? It's very hard to surprise a player. It's very hard to change sort of the rules of the universe around them without them noticing. It's really hard to do horror, right? You can do terror, right? You can do Jason chasing the high school students in the summer camp, right? You can do terror. Terror is easy, right? You can create excitement, right? That's exciting to be chased by Jason, to be chased by the dragon. That is not necessarily a horrifying experience. Horror is its own little creature. But anyway, so Trophy Dark is a tabletop role-playing game that seeks to live in that horror zone. The way it attempts to achieve a sense of horror at your table is, first, it's a very rules-light, very narrative-heavy system, right? And this is important because with fewer rules, fewer knobs to turn on your player's end of the table, they have less control over their universe and less mechanical game understanding of how the universe is going to react to their actions. There's more sort of responsibility placed on the game master's shoulders, and that's a way you can get towards horror. But the biggest thing I think Trophy Dark does is it asks all the players to be complicit in the horror, right? They are also sort of the architects of their character's doom. The game wants the players to drive towards the inevitable tragic end of their characters. That's the point, right? We have all done a good job playing a game of Trophy Dark if everyone around the table, the game master and the players, have worked to make Jeremy the woodcutter's inevitable damnation delightfully tragic. It's like watching a Freddy or Jason, a slasher flick, right? The characters within the story get to feel horror, but we as an audience, we as the players, we as the game masters, we as the audience of the slasher flick get to look on with glee as the characters split up. It's like the football jock and his cheerleader girlfriend make out on the dock. We as the audience all know, oh yeah, Jason is going to come and destroy them. The horrifying discovery for the characters in the movie are a delightful experience as watchers of the movie, right? The characters' surprise at learning their horrifying new truth that they are going to be macheted up by a guy in a hockey mask is our delight as an audience. And so Trophy Dark is trying to sort of play in this zone. And I think it's pretty clever. I don't know if I particularly like the game, but here's the other thing about Trophy Dark that makes it interesting. Trophy Dark is a game that's meant to be played in a single session, right? It's a single session game. You play it on one night, maybe a Halloween night. And I think that is sort of the magic of it, right? You don't need to sustain this sort of conceit that everything is doomed over multiple sessions, over multiple weeks. You go in hard, you hit the beats, you create a tragic story for a bunch of characters who are desperately trying to make their way in a terrifying world. And then you check out, right? Yeah, so I think Trophy Dark is cool. Let's talk about our pillars of discussion, the conversation. The conversation in Trophy Dark is real clever. I mean, it's a conversation game. It's a narrative game. So the rules go like quite in depth about sort of how the game master should handle and sculpt this game session. It's a game meant to be played in a single session. So there's a very sort of firm structure about how the session is meant to be played. It's about a 3 to 4 hour game, and a number of times within the rules, it'll call out to the game master like, this should happen at hour 2. This should happen at hour 3. The way the structure of the whole game is set up is there are 5 circles, and within each or five, not circles, they're called rings. There are 5 rings, and the players will move from ring to ring to ring to ring until they get to the center, and this represents them going on their journey into the haunted woods, into the disastrous moorland, into the foggy swamps, into the hungry wild. And each ring contains a terror, something to overcome, and a promise of future treasure, right? The thing that's drawing the characters into the center of their doom, and the thing that should be warding them off. And every time the characters overcome the challenge and interact with the thing to draw them further in, they move in a circle. And so the 5 rings of the incursion of the story are sort of play out as the 5 acts in like a 5-act structure. And the conversation around those 5 rings about how you move through them is pretty well structured. I think it's pretty interesting. It's a little loose, right? If you are used to a more sort of mechanically focused game, Trophy Dark doesn't have a lot of rules, which means that both horror is a thing that you can summon onto the table a little bit more easily, but it does mean that this conversation lacks a little bit of structure. This game has a game master and it has players, but the game master is encouraged to use the players as extra game masters. Everybody is game mastering this game. The game master is encouraged to ask lots of questions of the players, to invite them to describe things, to try to give them agency in the world, in the doom of the character that they're playing. I think it could be a very interesting, exciting conversation at the table. But reading the rules, I was left with a lot of questions about just sort of how to structure this game. Like if I had to run this game tomorrow, I would be, I think I would be quite nervous about running. I wouldn't quite know how to encourage the kind of conversation around the table that would make this game really cook. And I wish there was a little bit more advice on how to structure the game. For example, I already talked a little bit about how the structure of the game is done in these 5 rings, these 5 concentric rings that represent the journey of your characters into the woods. In each ring, they're going to discover a terror or a monster or an obstacle, and they're going to encounter a lure, something, a promise of treasure that lures them deeper into the woods. And there's a paragraph, for example, in this game that just says, hey, when the players have overcome the challenge and seen the lure, you move to the next ring. And you could overcome a challenge with a single dice roll, and you don't necessarily need to do a dice roll to see the lure that draws you into the center of the jungle. So if you go just by the rules in the game, you could potentially go through all 5 rings of the game in 5 rolls, and you could get there in 10 minutes, I think. And so I think the implied situation is that you spend a lot of time in each ring. The game master asks a lot of questions. You work to really build up the atmosphere of this place. You build up the backstory. You go into flashbacks of these characters. You set up their drives and why they're sort of rolling towards their doom, right? How to make that narratively satisfying. But the rule book itself doesn't give you a ton of advice on how to structure that conversation, and so beyond just saying, hey, you got to overcome a threat and sort of meet the promise or face the promise of treasure deeper into this adventure. And the game, I think, would really benefit from a whole group that is a group of 5 game masters could play the crap out of this game. I think it'd be a lot more difficult to play with players. I think this is definitely a game that if you were to play this game with players, I kind of want them to all have read the rule book, right? You really need buy-in from everybody to get this really to play, because the game does lack structure, I feel. And it lacks structure by design, but you need a lot of people thinking really cleverly and narratively, I think, to get this to really work. Personally, I know a lot of actors. I think if I played Trophy Dark with a bunch of actors, this would be a great game. Some of the things in this rule book they use theater terminology, as in like, hey, these are your props, these are your sets. These 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 are your narrative devices. Use them anyway. So I think this could be a really interesting conversation around the table. I don't think it's for everybody, and I wish that there was the people who wrote this game obviously thought a lot about the conversation. A lot of the language is really evocative. I love a lot of the ideas in this game, and I understand why there isn't more sort of mechanical structure. I kind of wish that there was. Trophy Dark is a horror game, right? It's a spooky game. It's about scary things, and the game I really enjoy this. It's got a very clear section where it talks about considering the other people at your table, right? Things might trigger them if you're talking about horrible things. There might be body horror. There might be social horror. There might be terrible things might happen to these player characters that you're playing, and you don't want to sort of offend the people you're with. You don't want to create situations that inadvertently hurt their feelings. There's a big part of this book that's just, hey, how do you handle those conversations, right? How do you respect other people? How do you tiptoe into these situations? How do you talk about them like clearly with everybody? Respect everybody's like sense of self, and like try not to hurt each other, right? Because horror films aren't for everybody, and there's people who love horror films, scary movies, that don't like other scary movies, right? I don't think the Saw movies are tasteful, for example. I'm never going to watch Hostel or Human Centipede. That doesn't. I don't want to, right? And there are tools in this game written into the rules, like codified ways to talk about this as a group, ways to sort of navigate this, to rewind time if something has happened that has inadvertently, uh, made someone uncomfortable, how to skip past situations, how to how to be responsive about each other's well-being around the table. I appreciate that that's in this book. I think it's important in a game about about sort of pushing people, we're pushing characters into uncomfortable situations. You don't want to accidentally push the people you care about around the table into uncomfortable situations. And I enjoy that the rules go and they talk about that. Yeah, um, it's a good section of the book. Back to other stuff. I think I've rambled a little bit about conversation, but let's move on. What about the setting, right? Trophy Dark is a beautiful, beautiful book. The art is throughout excellent. It is consistent. They've gone for this sort of, it feels a little photoshoppy. I think it's definitely digital art, right? I don't think there's a lot of analog art. It feels a little photoshoppy, but it's all gone for this really sort of realistic aesthetic. And it feels like everything in all the art, all these beautiful paintings, feels like they have a little bit of film grain. There's a wonderful sort of textuality to all of it, that it looks, all of the illustrations look like they could be right out of a storybook. There is, most of this book is are adventure seeds, that and all of these different incursions, all these different adventures you could go on, they all have such evocative art. They're a little creepy. I really, really like it. It's all a little dark, but everything's really well illuminated. I think, and especially like spooky, scary, horror-esque, grim, dark games, the art tends to lean really hard into actually literally being dark. A lot of muddy images of browns and grays, of smudges, of furious cross-hatching. But that's not what's going on in Trophy Dark. There's a lot of really like wonderfully illustrated figures that are well illuminated, lots of creepy scenes. Whoever was in charge of the art direction of this game blew it out of the park. As far as the setting, there is a little bit of an implied setting throughout Trophy Dark. There's a wonderful part of the game where you generate all these characters. The game is about characters who are doomed to die. And in sort of a classic OSR way, this is classic OSR sort of practice or system called the funnel. where everyone would generate some very weak level 0 characters with random occupations and random starting gear, and they'd throw them into a starting dungeon, and whichever characters survived the funnel would get the opportunity to become level 1 characters in a proper role-playing game. Right, a whole lot of characters would Hunger Games down into the chosen few. And in a very similar sense, Trophy Dark goes ahead and gives you lots of sort of generation options for when you start the game. You're creating these characters to go off and die in the woods, mostly. And so you generate what their occupations were, what their skills were, what magical powers. And there's a lot of lovely sort of evocative stuff like, oh, your occupation was serpent, right? And what does that mean? Right? Did you train serpents? Are you a snake person? Is this just representing, hey, you spent your life being like a treacherous snake? Right? Is this metaphorical? Is this literal? There's lots of fun little stuff like that. The actual incursions, the single session adventures you go on that take up most of the book, they're full of flavor text, right? They really want you to get across the feeling of these spaces. The game is about creating a sense of horror and dread and tragedy, which means there's lots of information in all of these sort of little tiny setting nuggets, seeds to create adventures that are just so evocative. There is a practice in this game, or a part of the incursions, part of the little story missions that you can go on, is that they're just full of little evocative descriptions. One of them that really stands out in my mind is, if it's one of the examples it gives in the book is, hey, if the theme of your incursion is encroaching sleep, it has like a list of a couple different sort of situations you could describe to your players to help bring out that theme, to sort of build that sense of dread. Oh, you walk into a clearing and you see 1,000 fireflies asleep and motionless on the leaves and petals of flowers in the field. Right? Real evocative sort of imagery. I think all that's great. Yeah, I think I just genuinely really like the sort of setting of this game. There's not a whole lot there, but I like what there is there, right? There's enough there to charge the imagination. I think the art is fantastic. I think the game really knows that it's about characters going to their doom. It hammers this over and over and over again, because I think the writers of this game really don't want players going in with the wrong idea, game masters going with the wrong idea. This is not a game where you go in and try to beat the system, get out alive, get your treasure. Someone might get out alive, but the game is about sort of embracing the horrible truth that the characters won't. It's very clear. The language is evocative. I want to describe terrible things after reading this book. Let's talk next about mechanics. The game is light on mechanics. It's got 3 big systems where there are 3 different sort of rules that cause you to roll dice. I think they're pretty clever. They remind me a little bit of Apocalypse World. I think there's a little bit of that DNA in there. So I guess let's get into some of these mechanics. There's not a whole lot there. And I think for the most part, they get at what's interesting, right? First, it uses a dice pool mechanic, right? So you're going to have light dice, which are white dice, and dark dice, which are black dice. Or you could just use 2 different colored dice. And when you go to do a thing, you're going to build a pool. You're going to add white dice when you have skills that help you in the situation. You're going to add white dice when people help you. You're going to add black dice. And then you're really just sort of looking at your highest dice roll to see if that achieves what you want. If your highest dice roll happens to be a black dice, then you add ruin to your character. When you have 6 ruin, your character is ruined, right? The forest claims them, they die, they go mad, they betray the party. And so as you play this game, you just continue to overcome challenges, and the ruin builds up. And as you go, your character builds up ruin on their character sheet. You, as the player, know that your character is moving closer and closer to its tragic end, and you can either play into that, or you can try to You sort of roll that back. There are systems where if you work against the party, then you can help reduce your own ruin, which brings the whole party to ruin, right? If you really wanted to go into this game knowing that there was tragedy, but trying to game the system to try to get out, you could do that, right? If you have a power gamer at your table who wants to win trophy and get out at the end, I think there are enough mechanics there that they can manipulate the dark and light dice. They can manipulate their ruin. I think that they could, they can play into that. But I think the game is definitely about losing and knowing that you're going to lose, and sort of the sculpting how you lose. And I think the rules sort of cut a nice balance between that, right? There's just enough tools for you to sort of manage your situation that it feels like you have some control. There's this fun mechanic where after you've built up, like at 6 ruin, your character's lost, but at 5 ruin, you can start rolling dice and trying to lower your ruin by feeding the wilderness, feeding the hungry wilds, right? The arrogance of your characters is that you've gone into the woods to take stuff and leave nothing behind, and the way you prevent your own doom is you have to feed the forest, and what did you bring to feed it but your other party members? That's sort of a lovely situation, and it's sort of naturally, I think, would create that third act drama in most horror films where someone or many someones have turned on each other, right? I talked about the movie Alien earlier. This is the android turning on the crew and saying, I think the alien is a superior life form, right? That's a lovely moment. And I think the way that sort of story beat has been built into the rules is cool. Throughout the course of the game, there's also this mechanic where you're going to be developing sort of conditions, right? The woods, the forest, the wilderness will change you, right? You will encounter something and you will take a ruin, and because you failed the roll, it'll change you forever, right? From now on, when you breathe out, a luminescent dust will come out of your mouth. What is that? You will hear the sounds of approaching footsteps behind you for the rest of your life. That's another condition the game suggests. Your hands will always tingle with pins and needles forever, right? And so as you go through this story, as you build up ruin, as these conditions pile up, as you draw ring by ring closer to the center of the game, the sort of the weight of the reality that is pressing in on your characters will become greater and greater. And I like how dread is sort of mechanized in this game, right? And I think that's important, right? If you're going to have a big terrible reveal, a terrible truth revealed, a moment of horror, a moment of collapse and calamity, the lightning bolt strikes the tower. I think you really need to build up dread beforehand, and a lot of the rules really play into that. I think that's good. Another cool mechanic is every character, when you generate them at the beginning, you roll on some tables, is every character gets a ritual or 3. And every ritual you gain, I think you can start with 0 rituals as well. But every ritual your character starts with is a powerful spell that just does a thing. A lot of those spells I wish were a little bit more mechanized, but I understand why they're not. Like one of the spells is Yoke, and it just allows you to apply the force of a spectral bull to a situation. What does that mean? I don't know. It's a narrative game. You'll figure it out in play, right? You need to move a rock. You use your ritual called Yoke and yank the rock with the force of a yoked ghostly bull. It's a little bit of a fiat-y situation. What I do like about it is for each ritual you start the game with, you start with a ruin, right? And you can start up with 3. So you might start the game halfway to ruined, right? But you have the ability to use the force of a spectral bull to shoot snakes out of your fingertips, to charm the undead, etc. A lot of really cool evocative stuff in there. But again, mechanics light, right? So I think in certain groups, I think you're going to have a trouble adjudicating some of this stuff. If I really wanted to, and I had the spell Yoke, that just says I can apply the force of a spectral bull, I'm going to cast Yoke and apply the force of a spectral bull to your heart. I don't know. I will yank the tongue out of your mouth with the force of a spectral bull. Yoked, right? Like there, you could, if you wanted to argue some of these rituals doing crazy things. I think you could. I don't think it's in the spirit of the game, but the game can't mechanically tell you what you can and can't do with these rituals because that would defeat the purpose. So I think that's an interesting little hang up that you might come to. Have I talked about all of the mechanics I wanted to talk about? I think so. It's a very mechanically light game. I didn't want to go through all the rules because I think you could. I was very intimidated when I first got this book. I pull it up as a PDF, and sometimes when you get a PDF, you don't know. You don't get a sense of the size of a rule book when you're looking at it in a PDF. Yeah, it says the page numbers at the top, but it's hard to really get a sense of that. And I was reading through the rules of this book, and I was scrolling down, and I looked at the little bar on the side of my screen that scrolls down, and I was like, oh, it hasn't even moved a centimeter. This must be a huge book. There must be so many rules. It's got to be massive. And I kept scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and this little bar at the side was barely moving down. I was like, this is a huge book. And I think it is quite big, but far, 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 far more than half of this book are just incursions, are different scenarios that you could play. And this is a single shot game. You play this for 1 3 to 4 hour session. So because there are like a dozen, probably more than a dozen of these incursions, there's a ton of content in this game. But it also means, because most of the book is definitely the incursions, right? These really great thematic little adventures to go on, full of their own monsters and own dangers and own conditions and their own little themes. Really, the rule section of this book is quite condensed. So, I think people looking for a really crunchy experience, look not here. Let's go to our final pillar of discussion. How should you use this game? There's a little section in this book about how you should use this game, and I quite liked that. Right? I think more tabletop role-playing games should do that. I think a lot of tabletop role-playing games, they sell themselves sort of as a monolith, right? This is the game that you're going to spend the next 5 months playing with your friends. You're going to spend 2 months just learning the rules. You're going to devote yourself to this game, and it's going to be this game only, right? You're going to become a Dungeons and Dragons person. You're going to become a Pathfinder person. You're going to become a Rogue Trader person, right? This is the role-playing game that you are going to devote your time and energy to forever. But Trophy Dark it knows that it's a niche product that has a very specific use, and it's very tuned to do that very specific thing of a single-shot horror adventure. And so it says, hey, how should you use this book, right? How should you incorporate this? And I think it's great. And I'm just going to repeat some of the stuff it says in this book. You should use Trophy Dark. You could use it as a primer, right? You want to go on a short adventure before going on a more detailed adventure in a larger campaign. Play an episode, play a game of Trophy Dark. You want to go and have a whole campaign where you fight vampires in a horrible vampire land using Dungeons and Dragons. Why don't you first play a game of Trophy Dark to show off this environment to the players, to show them what this land is like to the non-heroes, right? You could play a game of Trophy Dark after another campaign, right? The events of a campaign happen, a civilization is laid to ruin, some big story beat has happened. You're going to do a time skip, jump like 50 or 100 years into the future before playing your next sort of campaign in that session. You could squeeze a game of Trophy Dark in between there to show sort of how the world has changed between your first campaign and your second campaign. I think using this pretty simple single-shot game as a sort of a world-building device, as a tone setter for another game, I think is a really cool. I remember there was a really good module for an OSR game. And what it was a dungeon, and you played this dungeon as a bunch of characters, and you go through this dungeon. And the whole point of this OSR dungeon, this old school Dungeons and Dragons dungeon, was that your characters would all die going through this dungeon, right? The dungeon was too hard. But once you had finished playing the dungeon, you jump 1,000 years into the future, and you start a new game, players roll up new characters, and you start the actual campaign. And all of the stuff that your first wave of characters had futzed with in the dungeon would trigger a bunch of traps to make the dungeon a lot less dangerous, but it would also set the starting state for that dungeon when your actual characters go there. And I think that's so cool. I really enjoyed running that dungeon. There was like a big time machine that duplicated people. It was cool. But anyway, you can use Trophy Dark to do the same kind of thing that old module did. Perhaps you're playing a tabletop role playing campaign, and your characters are like, "We're going to go into the haunted woods and slay the forest witch." You could play a game of Trophy Dark set before your actual characters go there to set up what the forest witch is like. So when your actual characters go there, they're not having the horror experience. That was reserved for Trophy Dark. They're having the standard heroes go on an adventure experience, but it's all informed by the fact that all the players have played a game of Trophy Dark. They know how horrible this place is, and they feel great for conquering it. And you know what? Another thing I think you could use Trophy Dark for, Halloween's coming up. Play a game of Trophy Dark. But I don't think this game is good for everybody. It's a very narrative-focused game. It is a very rule-light game. This game runs on vibes. Trophy Dark is a vibes game, and you need buy-in from everybody. I think you want everybody to understand this game well enough, at least read the player rules section of this book to really get into it. I think it lacks a bit of structure. I think it lacks structure by design, but I think that'll cause some groups who try to jump right into this to run aground. I enjoyed reading Trophy Dark. I don't know if I'll ever play it, but I liked thinking about how it approached the tropes of a horror genre. I guess now, I've gotten to the end of my review of Trophy Dark. Should I do a review of Trophy Gold? I don't think there's quite enough material for me to do a whole video on it, so I'm going to do quick. This is Sparks Note Zach's edition, Rulebook Club bonus extra round. Go. Trophy Gold. Everything I read about it before getting the actual books said that, oh, you can't compare Trophy Dark and Trophy Gold. They're two completely different games. Trophy Gold is designed to do a long campaign. Trophy Dark is designed to do a single session. They use completely different rules, or this is what I read online. There was reviews that said, hey, a bunch of reviews either reviewed Trophy Dark or Trophy Gold, and most of them just said, hey, you can't compare these two games. They're completely different. They share almost all the same rules. They share almost all the same terminology. Trophy Gold, I think, tries to use the minimalist rules of Trophy Dark in order to simulate a kind of game that is similar to an OSR game, right? Trophy Gold is all about collecting gold, paying off your debts, going into the dungeons, coming out. It's about the logistics of adventuring, using the rules of Trophy Dark. A big thing in Trophy Gold is, hey, it's not a horror game. It's a game about paying off your debtors. You have this debt that's constantly building up, and you have to manage it by bringing gold back to pay off your debtors. And you lose in Trophy Gold, not necessarily by dying, but most likely getting thrown in debtor's prison. I think that's kind of neat. But I think all of the strengths of Trophy Dark that make it so thematic and so interesting and really laser focused on creating a horror experience sort of are stripped away in Trophy Gold, which leaves you with some very sort of light rules that I think if I really wanted to do that sort of like gritty logistics focused tabletop role playing game, I would just play an OSR game. I would play something that had the rules where you could really engage with them to get nitty and gritty about the logistics. And so I don't really think Trophy Gold is super interesting to me. And especially when placed right beside Trophy Dark. Trophy Dark does so many things intentionally that I think are really great and really, really focused. I didn't watch the Kickstarter. I didn't pay attention to that. I only skimmed a couple of reviews just to sort of make judgments about, hey, should I review both of these at the same time? But I really feel that Trophy Gold is an add-on from the Kickstarter. That, and I don't know. Maybe Trophy Gold was the principal game, and Trophy Dark is the add-on, or maybe neither of them were add-ons. Maybe both of them were just play tested together. I don't know. But it feels like Trophy Gold is sort of an add-on from the Kickstarter to try to add value to the game, right? They're Kickstartering a Trophy Dark, which is a single session game, Maybe people had trouble justifying, paying Kickstarter prices and delivery and things like that for a game that you play one time or in a single session. I think Trophy Gold is maybe the value proposition. They're like, hey, no, you can totally play it for multiple sessions. Like, oh, you can play a whole long campaign. Yeah, I think you can play a whole long campaign. I think it has all of the weaknesses of Trophy Dark and none of the strengths. I think if you're interested in the kinds of stories Trophy Gold wants to tell, you're better off playing a different role playing game. Trophy Dark is doing some really cool and interesting things, and you can buy them together, Trophy Dark and Trophy Gold, or you can just buy Trophy Dark. You can just buy Trophy Gold. If you're on the fence, I say buy Trophy Dark. I say probably not buy Trophy Gold. They had a bunch of setting books that I have not read because I didn't read those. I'm interested in the rules here, the actual games. So I have no opinion on the setting books that were part of the Kickstarter. That is my opinion. What's happening next time on table the rule the what's the name of this show? The Rulebook Club. Yeah. What was I about to say? The Tabletop Rulebook Club? Anyway, next time on the Rulebook Club, we're doing our Bonanza episode. I've been reading through the tabletop role playing games that Chris is being sent by companies and that he is ignoring and just sending to me. I'm going to try to make that a blitzy, quick, snappy episode. We'll see that coming at you soon. Ciao. Ciao. Goodbye. What do you still go? Leave. Leave. No, we're not putting any ads at the end of this video. Well, I mean, actually, we should put ads at the end of this video. We should put ads at the end. Just put a block of like 5 ads at the end of this video. And if any of these people want to come and just watch them and just, give, for the ad revenue, yeah, put ads. Just put as Chris, if you're seeing this, if you're the one who's putting this on your YouTube channel, you're the one who's putting this. I'm not putting it on your YouTube channel. Put as many ads at the end of this video as you possibly can. And anyone who wants to stay to that long can watch them all. I don't know if you have that much control on YouTube. Goodbye. Goodbye. Get out of here. Go. Leave.